Thanks, Erin. All right, gonna share my screen. And is everyone able to see two cats? Okay, awesome. Welcome to our webcam session on using Tailwind CSS for a year. Was it smooth sailing or not? So we'll go through introductions. I'm Rebecca Hong, currently the front-end web developer at Stanford Web Services. I actually started back in 2019 as a customer experience specialist and recently transitioned into the front-end web developer role, which is awesome. I'm currently located remotely in LA, but I did work on campus for the first 2 years-ish prior to the pandemic, I believe. But yeah, that's my little intro. I'll pass it to Yvonne really quick so that she can introduce herself.
Rebecca, I'm Yvonne Tang. I'm also from Stanford Web Services and also a front-end developer. So I've been with Web Services for about 1.5 years. And so all my Tailwind experience started when I started working at Web Services. And then, but prior to that, I worked at University Communications for 2 years. And I see our friend Justin Ran here, also from UCOM. So hi. And I am in the Bay Area. But, right now, we're in hybrid mode, so I'm on site twice a week. And I'll hand back to Rebecca, and she could give you an intro on Tailwind CSS.
Sounds good. Thanks, Yvonne. So going on to our next slide, we have a little agenda of like 7 different general topics with minimized topics inside it. The first one we'll be going through is what is Tailwind CSS. The second one is like a little project showcase of what SWS has been working on. Then the third one is legacy versus JIT mode, which is just comparing 2 different types of Tailwind configurations and such. Then we'll go through the pros, the cons, along with tips and tricks that can help you out with the cons. Do a little showcasey for Decanter V7 / a little, just like a little plug for Decanter. And then of course we'll have a Q&A. But yeah, we'll kick it off with some questions, which is number 1 for you all. Who has heard of Tailwind CSS? I know we don't have a poll set up, so feel free to just drop yes, no in chat. I'll give you guys like 5 seconds just to do a little quick reply. Cool. Thanks for all your contributions to chat. All right, and then we'll move on to the second follow-up question. Who has used Tailwind CSS? No obligations to answer, but you know, it'd be cool if we knew who and who hasn't. Just a couple seconds for that as well. All right, now we'll move on to all the cool introduction stuff. So here's our slide introduction to Tailwind CSS, which we will also call TW throughout our slides. We'll go through really quick what is Tailwind CSS, what the 2021 state of CSS and where Tailwind ranks in that, and then also check the website out really briefly. So what is Tailwind CSS? Well, it is a utility-first CSS framework, and I'm sure as some of you might be wondering, because I definitely did when I first heard it, what does that mean? And it just essentially means that building block classes are provided to us that we can use directly in our markup, and just kind of like makes it easier in a sense to style things. And it can definitely be customized and kind of like configured to just like work with your design system that you might have, similar to what we have in Decanter and also Stanford Identity. And then in terms of its ranking, for usage, it actually ranks number 2 based on 2021's results. Bootstrap, of course, is still number 1. Darn them, just kidding, Bootstrap's awesome. But yeah, Tailwind is currently number 2. But in terms of satisfaction, it is number 1 because of its flexibility and just, I want to just say awesomeness with how like flexible it is and also customizable it is, just to reiterate. And in terms of checking out their website, I'm actually like a huge fan of their site. Then again, it's like, well, I've been using it for this past year, so what did you all expect? So of course their website has a dark and light mode. I think right now my system is, as you can see, on dark mode, so you can definitely change to light. They have a bunch of documentation that you can look up. It is specific to, I want to say minimalist, at least like minimum CSS knowledge. So you can go ahead, search up like widths. It'll give you specific classes along with its CSS property and all that jazz. And it's pretty easy to navigate through and all that stuff. There's like a wonderful get started section, which is essentially like really all you need. You don't need to go Stack Overflow things and all that jazz. You can just get started right here if you wanted to add it to your project. But continuing onward to show you more so other things. In terms of learning Tailwind CSS, are there any knowledge prerequisites? The short answer is nope, not at all. You don't have to like know Sass or know specific things, but it is always handy to have some understanding of CSS, as you might have just saw. In order to really like utilize their quick search, you probably should know some CSS properties and such, and kind of like know what you're looking for. Because I'm gonna be honest, when I first started out in CSS, I had no idea what justify content meant and what it was associated with. So definitely recommend some CSS knowledge, or sorry, CSS knowledge, yes, there. And then also basic HTML knowledge of like IDs and classes and how that works. Along with like bonus stuff would be like NPM packages and desktop responsiveness, because how will you know how to install things if you do not know what NPM is? So there's definitely that. Again, just to reiterate, your getting started documentation is quite easy to understand, and it covers like everything that you would need to know. And then continuing on, Yvonne and I are going to do a little quick demo of our current projects, or I guess more so live production sites, just to clarify. So the one that I will be showing off is Make a Gift. And so we have this Make a Gift website. Wow, so pretty and cool. That our team worked on, I think, earlier last year. And this website actually uses, as we inspect, Tailwind styles. You can see that all our specific Tailwind styles are prefixed with SU dash. And you can see kind of like where things align and fall into place. And it's just all there in its glory. And then we also have this other page, which is super cool and responsive as well. Completely just like written with Tailwind. So there is that. And then I will pass it back to Yvonne so that she can screen share and kind of walk us through the alumni and travel study website.
Rebecca, share my screen. Move the audience video over. So thank you, Rebecca, for showing us Make a Gift. So that site have the look of a more traditional Stanford website look with the brand bar and then global footer. And then I have another site here that also made by web services. And I see a few of you here in the audience that are also a part of this, Matt, Dina, and then Forrest. So this is another site that we built purely with Tailwind for the styling. And as you can see, like you can create a lot of very custom look and feel here. So this is very different from Make a Gift site that Rebecca just showed you. So for example, you can even have like subtle animation on the nav, and then if you inspect again, you see just Tailwind classes in here, and then you can achieve things like animation, and you can change the origin. So for example, you can see the direction of the anime. So it has all these utilities available for you. And then in the same repo, we actually built another subsite that's under this domain, and that's the travel study site. And then as you can see, it got a lot of its own custom styles as well, and some pretty customized things. And so, yeah, I just want to give you an idea of what Tailwind can do. And then like, for example, if you click on this menu, you can build modals and anything that you can think of, you can make with Tailwind. And so we actually, let me get back to the slide. So we have a link to our alumni repo. So right now it's public. I don't know for how long, but if you want to check out some of our code, you can actually follow this link at the bottom of this slide. And you can take a look, go into the source, and you can look at our components and see how we style each of these components. And so next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of Tailwind. So there are two modes. So when we first started using Tailwind, that was January last year. And at the time, we were building the Make a Gift website that we back can show you. And so at the time, I think we were on about the late versions of Tailwind version 1, and then a little bit into version 2. So at the time, the default mode for Tailwind is now we call the legacy mode. So what it does is you set up config. So you tell Tailwind what classes to generate, so you can have your custom color palette, for example. So for example, like for us, we have an identity guide for Stanford with a custom color palette. So we tell Tailwind to generate all these classes. So a lot of CSS classes use colors, for example, right? Like border colors, have text, you have background. So imagine there are thousands and thousands of CSS that it generates. So for example, in the beginning, usually this huge CSS file is like on the order of 10 megabytes. So so what it does, the legacy mode, is first generates this huge CSS file, and then you tell it to look at where your template, your markup is, and it will see what Tailwind classes you actually use. Then it would use purge CSS under the hood and get rid of all the classes that you don't actually use. But the problem with this is while you're working on development, it doesn't purge all the unused CSS classes. So as a developer, you probably have experience, you try to inspect your components in the browser and try to change things and then try to do some fine tuning. And then because of this huge CSS file, when you try to inspect your component, sometimes the browser is totally crawling, like it would actually freeze the whole browser. So that was not a really good developer experience in the beginning. And also, because of this legacy mode, if you want to add some arbitrary one-off style, so for example, if you suddenly remember, I need this one extra color, you can't just go into your code and say, I want to add this one-off thing, or I want to do some quick prototyping. You have to go back into the config and then manually add it to the Tailwind config and then review everything again. So it was a lot slower. And now we are using the default, we're using version 3 Tailwind for most of our projects, and it's called the just-in-time mode. And this is a lot faster because the CSS is generated on demand. So even in development, it only generates the classes that you're using, but you need to tell Tailwind where to look. So you will tell it where to find your React templates, for example, or your plain HTML files, and then it will generate those classes. And then all the different Tailwind variants are available by default. So hover, focus, focus visible, dark mode, anything that you can think of. And you don't have to go and manually switch them on. And then, so adding the arbitrary one-off values is a lot easier. They introduced this square bracket notation. So for example, somewhere, so for example, you want to add a very specific font size or very specific color, or sometimes when you do absolute positioning of elements, like you want to move things 1 pixel up or down, then you can just use the square bracket notation. You don't have to go back to add it to your config file. So it's much faster. It is a lot more user-friendly now. And I'm going to hand this back to Rebecca so she can talk about the pros of Tailwind.
Awesome. Thanks, Yvonne. All right, let's give this screen share another try. And can everyone see my screen? Okay, sweet. So in terms of pros about Tailwind, what do we like about it? So one of our favorite things is that it works with many different platforms. It can technically be configured to work with your framework or pattern or platform of choice with minimal setup. As you can see, we have it working with React and with React with Gatsby or Next.js as well, along with Drupal, WordPress, and then also, of course, out of box, plain HTML works. Another thing that we like as well is that it's easily customizable. You can create your own theme in Tailwind, and it's like very easy in terms of overriding and extending things. You can also it can also be used to create your building blocks, your own design system. And then we have like a little example of how it can be configured. So on the left is a Tailwind config.js, and it's been like super simplified just for the sake of this example. And in here, we were able to extend a color palette from our colors.js file, and then we kind of just like went in and defined a bunch of different coloring types. And then in the sample markup, just for the sake of, again, of an example, we kind of added a Facebook icon and then implemented a color white, which is the default, as you can see in the preview, and then a hocus color, which is a crossover of both the hover and focus of whichever color Facebook we had defined previously. So there's a little example of how we can configure custom colors and such. On to the next pro. It like encourages working with constraint in terms of like being able to really like have us hunker down. Well, I guess let me rewind a little bit. So the nature of Tailwind encourages working with limited, discrete set of values. So in terms of color, spacing, etc., that all helps to enforce design consistency, so that if we were to use this across multiple sites, we can always go like, oh, for this card, we always want to have the padding like P, which stands for padding, dash, and then whatever number we would prefer in that sense. And because of that, it helps us think through, like, do we really need to go out of our way to write a custom special CSS like block just for that one style? Or can we work it in with what we already have and like just like enables us to just think a little bit more about where we use design or where we use certain CSS and whether or not it's actually necessary, which is like just really awesome. It's really fast to write as well. So we have like a little comparison that Yvonne actually put together of like what it would look like if you wanted to put a button together, and then how it would look in just Tailwind CSS using their utility classes, and then what you would have to write technically for SCSS. And so you can already tell it's a little bit more condensed. There is like, I guess like a startup or like knowledge gap, I guess, if you're not super familiar with all of their utility classes. But once you are familiar, then it makes prototyping and also just styling things a breeze in comparison to writing just like raw CSS or SCSS in that case. Another pro is also there's no duplicate and also like no unused CSS. So if you were to use the same Tailwind classes, like for this example, border red for button, card, and image, the CSS style will only get generated once because of the utility class that it uses. So there's no need to, I guess, in terms of if we were writing pure CSS or raw CSS, you'd have to normally copy and paste it into the style sheet and then import it over and all that jazz. But instead, it'll just reference that one style sheet where it is defined as border red. Another thing that is kind of cool, early on when Yvonne and I were testing out Tailwind and just like experimenting with it before implementing it in our own Decanter version 7, is that they also provide like an @apply, which allows you to kind of incorporate Tailwind with your pre-existing CSS or SCSS in this case. It is also available so that you can overwrite like styles from other third-party component libraries that you might be using. So that is like a cool thing. We have an example here of kind of like what kind of use cases you'll probably use @apply if you were to just use it, not necessarily to override, but just in general. on the left, you can see that we have some markup that uses summary item, summary name, and summary value more than once. And then we have a little CSS bloop there that uses add apply, which allows you to just use the Tailwind utility classes, but specify it to a class name. And then, of course, a little preview, just in case you're curious about how the markdown looked in that case. And continuing onward, we have cons, which Yvonne will go over.
Thanks, Rebecca. Share my screen again. So Rebecca shared with you what she liked about Tailwind, and then we will talk about what are some of the issues that we have with it, and then whether there are any workarounds. So first one, I think that was one that we found out really early on. So Tailwind does not like dynamically generated class names. So what we mean by that is that so sometimes, like if you look at the left-hand side, you're probably tempted to have the class name constructed this way, like in the middle somewhere you have a conditional, and then like for example, if a button is disabled, then it shows a gray color background, and then otherwise it's green. So this is a pretty common way when you create your components. But nope, so Tailwind does not like that at all. So it needs to see the complete unbroken class name. So everything has to be spelled out. So the way the just-in-time engine works is not very smart. So it will scan all your template files, and then it doesn't care whether your Tailwind classes is in comments or any file. It just needs to see the full class names. So we found out we could, let me go back to the slide. So you could do what we do on the right hand side. So what you do is you can set up some variables, like kind of like configs. So for example, we have a default and you have a disable option, and then you construct your Tailwind classes that correspond to those options. And then depending on what options or properties, like in React, and then you pass it into the component, and then it will pick out the correct string of Tailwind classes. So that way, Tailwind will be able to generate what you need. And this has been working pretty well for us. And then, so Tailwind, I hear a lot of people complain, and it bothers me a little bit too. And then especially when you inspect your code in the browser, you can see a huge long mess of classes, and it kind of pollutes your components. So first of all, there are two things you could do. So Matt, who's in the audience, when he came on, he suggested we actually separate out all the Tailwind classes into a different file. So, but in the same directory as the component. So it's a little bit cleaner to read. And then also what you could do is, for example, if you have some group of classes that you end up reusing over and over. So for example, if you have a button, and then you have some base padding, font sizes, or border width that you will end up using over and over, then you can group them into a custom utility that you can use. So here, the example here we have is called a stretch link. So I could show you an example on the SAA website. So what it does is that it allows you to add a link around, say, for example, the headline in a card, but then it make the whole card clickable. So you can see here, there are a lot of CSS in to create this stretch link class. So you don't want to use Tailwind classes to add to that component every time, because there are so many lines of CSS. So what we did is we create a custom Tailwind utility that's called stretch link, and then we just apply it to this card and the link. So here you can see it has the SU stretch link class, and then it will show all the CSS that we added in the custom utility. So you don't have to write that out every time using separate Tailwind classes. So that's an example that we have. So it can help keep your markup a little bit cleaner. And then the third possible issues is, so what if you use multiple libraries or front-end frameworks? Like if you use Bootstrap or Google Materials, or there's so many front-end libraries out there. So it is totally possible that they will end up having the same class name for things. So for example, like margin access, like I can imagine there are multiple libraries there with a class name like that. So if you want to avoid conflicts, avoid things competing with each other, you can actually namespace your Tailwind classes by just adding this simple prefix in the configuration. And then so for us, we add the SU prefix to all our Tailwind utility. So it's consistent with our design system since all the previous versions. So we add the SU prefix, stand for Stanford University, to all our decanter classes. So we do that the same way for version 7, which is Tailwind base. And then another issue is, so you might have certain CSS properties or values or selectors that you want to use, but they're not available out of the box in Tailwind. So what do you do? So for example, if you want to use calculations in the value, or if you want to use text shadows, and there are actually no text shadow utilities in Tailwind, which I'm surprised about. And then, or you know, the head selector that just came out, that's pretty cool. You want to use it, but Tailwind doesn't offer it. Or sometimes Rebecca recently run into this problem. She wanted to target a specific browser to have some fallback styles. So what do you do in that case? So there are a few possible solutions. So first of all, make sure you check out all the available modifiers that Tailwind has to offer. So it actually has here, if you go to this section, and then scroll down a little bit, it has a lot of pseudo classes, pseudo elements, and there are some really obscure things that are available. And then media queries, so even things like dark mode or prefers reduced motion, and or text direction from right to left. Like there are many of these modifiers available. So you, I suggest clicking on them and then check out a full list, because the list is actually really long. They have many. So even for like input a required field, valid, or whether a checkbox is checked, it has a lot of utilities available. So make sure you look at all of them. And then, so if that still doesn't work, that's always the square bracket notation. So actually, since they switched to version 3, there have been some updates of the square bracket. So it's becoming a lot more flexible. So for example, if you want to enter something custom for a grid column template, and you can do something really customized like this using custom column width, and then you can even add a completely new CSS property that's not available in Tailwind. So for example, Tailwind doesn't actually offer a mask type utility out of the box, but you can actually add the whole thing within the square bracket. I've never actually used it myself. So, but I was going through the documentation and saw that this is a new feature. So we will probably start using it ourselves. And then there's also, you can also create your own Tailwind plugins, utilities, and components. So like for example, the one that we just showed, the stretch link. And then I will show you another one. Let's see. So for example, Tailwind out of the box doesn't offer a children selector. So with just one line here, we added one ourselves. And then, or sometimes if you want to write hover and focus state, but you're lazy, you don't want to write, if like sometimes if they're the same, you don't have to write two different classes. So you can, here we use focus, which combine hover and focus. So this is just one line, and then we were able to add our own two custom Tailwind modifiers. So there are a lot that you could do. And there are also a lot of third-party plugins. And then Tailwind itself also offer some official plugin as well. So for example, there's a CSS has a line clamp property. And then I don't think it's available out of the box in Tailwind right now, but they offer an official plugin, which give you the line clamp utilities. And then, so here is another example that we added a custom Tailwind utility. So on the travel study side, we have a tag here. The text direction is vertical like this. So this is not available in Tailwind. So we write our own. It's pretty simple here. You just add a file and then just add the CSS, and then you can start using it in your own components. So pretty straightforward. And then number 5. So for someone who started using Tailwind, there's a little bit of learning curve, or like you have to get used to the way they write the classes. You have to remember the class names. So one thing I find frustrating, like even today, is that if you look at the classes available out of the box, so they have some classes like text XS or text MD, but exactly how big are they? So like, am I supposed to memorize them, right? There's so many. And then they have margin classes. So for example, they have a M-10 class, which actually means 2.5 REM margin. But how am I supposed to know that? Like, I don't quite understand the relationship between the class and then the value. So I find it frustrating to have to remember that, but there are workarounds. So first of all, if you're using VS Code, you can use the Tailwind CSS Intellisense plugin or extension. So you can download this. The Tailwind team actually put together this plugin. So what you could do is when you install it in VS Code, you can hover over the Tailwind class name, and then it will come up and it will show you the actual value, what that class represents. And then it also does autocomplete and a bunch of other things. And it also, it can allow you to change your word font size. So if you're using a different word font size that we do, you can change it in the setting of this plugin, and it will show the correct value. So I mentioned that I didn't like some of the class names because it's very, the value it represents is very obscure to me. So what we did is we create our own overrides. So for example, we didn't like margin like M10. So we added our own, like, so here we have 01 EM. So which means 0.1 EM. So for me, that's easier to remember. So when I want to add a margin, I just do SU-M-01 EM, and then I know it's adding a margin of 0.1 EM. So I don't have to remember, oh, M10 is 2.5 REM, which seems like a bit difficult to understand. And then also, since we use 1 EM, so our word font size is 10 pixels. So 1 REM equals 10 pixels. So we have here, if I use M10 with my setting like this, is actually equals 10 pixels. So for me, like if I do M20, it's 20 pixel, M100 is 100 pixels. So for me, that's a little bit easier to understand. So you can completely override any Tailwind value. So we choose to do it this way. So I guess the verdict is, at least for me and Rebecca, we think we will use it again. We had pretty good experience so far. Can't speak for everyone, but I like it myself. And so we Stanford, we have a design system, Decanter, the version 7, which uses Tailwind. I think we already mentioned it, but we have a new RC version that just came out, I think last week. So please feel free to check it out, and you can use it for your project as well. And we have a Slack channel, Decanter. So you're encouraged to pose questions, and we can have discussions. And then you can also check out the preview site. I could show it just quickly. So this is mostly for us to test our configs. So you can see all the different typography, and then all the Stanford Identity Guide colors, and then shadows, things like that. So I think it's question time. So Rebecca and I will take questions, and then Rebecca got this link which you could go to, and you can post your questions there. Let's see.
There's a couple questions there, Yvonne. Would you guys like me to read them, and then you guys can, either you or Rebecca can answer them?
Sure, that sounds great, Jen.
Okay, cool. So the first one is from Mr. Crump, James Crump. It says, we started evaluating TW and I've already hit a dilemma. When applying classes to a view with a grouping like grid calls for, everything gets put into a column, H1s and H3s.
I got that figured out while you were doing the presentation, which was very good, by the way.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm so glad you figured it out.
Okay, next question. What do you recommend for people who want to use Tailwind but who aren't sure how to start?
I guess it also depends what kind of framework or platform you're using. There are a lot of starter templates out there that we find. Like, for example, when we were using Gatsby, Next.js, or if you're using WordPress or Drupal, like I've been seeing a lot of starter templates that get you started with your platform of choice with Tailwind. So I would suggest probably look into community for some of these starter templates, and then play around with it for a little bit. And then also I would probably just if you don't want to create your custom classes, probably just start with Tailwind out of the box, and then get familiar with using the classes, and then you can create your own classes as you find out what you need, what is missing, then you can create your custom classes. And I'll let Rebecca, if you want to add anything.
Sorry, my internet's a little bit unstable, but in terms of learning, it was just primarily, as Yvonne said, like just reading documentation, referring to a lot of things. There's like a huge Tailwind community. I don't want to say like huge, like Drupal huge, but it's definitely like growing each and every day. That just like share their little snippets of like how they bundle utility classes and how they create certain things. So it's like really awesome. And I'm sure like if you had any questions, or if you were like envisioning like a certain card or something of that sort, someone else probably thought of something similar too. So you'd probably be able to find it on the web. So that would be kind of like my advice, is just like utilize Google as much as you can.
There is also so Tailwind, the team create a website called Headless UI, and they provide a bunch of free components that you can use. So I actually, me and Rebecca, we added the link in the resource section of our slide, so you could check it out, Headless UI. So you could click into it and then see how they use Tailwind classes to build these components as well. I hope that answers the question.
That's a good answer to me. So the next question is, what was your experience like when you first started learning Tailwind?
For me, I think it takes at least a couple weeks to get used to it because so before that I was using just mainly SAS, writing mix-ins, things like that, and then so with Tailwind, because now instead of writing CSS or SAS, you actually have to remember how they construct the classes. So and then also have to find out what's available and what's not available. So it definitely takes a little getting used to. But now since the just-in-time JIT mode is the default, it actually has gotten already a lot better. So we use the square bracket notation a lot, like for anything that's like kind of an arbitrary value. So that's been really helpful. And Rebecca, what do you think?
I think when I first started using Tailwind, I was kind of like skeptical because I, of course, came from a similar background as Yvonne, where I was like writing like SCSS or even just pure CSS. And I was like, why do I need to change and learn these utility classes when we could just write everything on our own, like rewrite all the things. But after kind of like getting up to speed on kind of like how it works and then how like easy it is to use, just because we have like things we can find, at least for the Decanter V7 one, it actually made it a lot easier to style things instead of me having to go look up like mixins. It's just more so like, oh, I can look at the Tailwind documentation or just how it configured in Decanter V7 and plug in the utility class I needed. So I'd say like things went well, but in terms of like the learning and like kind of getting up to speed portion, there was like slight reluctance, and it definitely took me a little bit of going back and vouch. I think I spent like the first 2 months just randomly messaging her like, hey, so you know how we did this thing in Decanter V6? What's the Decanter V7 version of this? And so on and so forth. So yeah, that was my experience. And Yvonne played like a huge part in getting me onboarded for sure.
We have time for a couple more questions, right? We end at 3. Why did our team decide to use Tailwind? Or why did your team decide to use Tailwind?
That's a good question. I remember who suggested going with Tailwind, but I can't quite remember the exact reason. So it was a developer who has left our team. Her name is Katria, and I believe one of the reasons is that it's very portable. So Tailwind, because it's just CSS and just classes, so you can pretty much copy and paste all the classes from one project to another. Like whether you're using Drupal or you're using React, the classes stay the same. So it's very easy to share styling across different projects. And then also, since we are building a design system, Decanter, so we find creating our own building block classes is a good way to share out some of these utilities. So in a way, they're kind of a counterpart of the SAS mix-ins. So because like when you're trying to create a design system for a community as big as Stanford, everyone's using different technology. Someone's using React, or if someone uses Angular, or someone's using WordPress or Drupal. It's hard to actually create something that's easily share and be used efficiently by everyone. But class name is something that's really easy to share out. So I think we end up with that approach. We found it's working pretty well. So definitely there are pros and cons, but I feel like it's been working pretty well so far. Rebecca, what do you think?
I too do not recall exactly when Tailwind came into the picture. I feel like I just like woke up one day and we were using Tailwind and I was like, okay, cool, I'll go along with it. It's great. It sounds good to me. I always like learning new things and exploring just like different technologies and different design patterns and libraries, of course. I do remember like my first exposure to it was definitely in the SAA sub-theme. If you go to, I believe, oh, what was it? There are a couple sites that use a sub-theme, but that was like my first exposure of using Tailwind and also using the add apply method, just because it was a Drupal site and we were still doing like SCSS files and such. I thought it was really cool, but then also again, it went back to like my whole onboarding concept thing of like, why must we do this? Of course, that was like last two years ago, Rebecca, maybe like a year and a half ago, Rebecca, where she was like really reluctant, but now I'm just like all for it. Again, it's really easy to use, and I don't know, it's just like we've used it on like a daily basis for the past year, and I have no complaints aside from occasional like moments. But yeah, sorry, that totally didn't answer the question of like why did we start using it though.
Okay, Dina posted in our chat that the Sierra Camp is one of the ones that still use that sub-theme. I have two more questions for you, so see if we can do them real quick. One of them was, do you have any experience with Tailwind UI?
Yeah, so we actually took a look at it. So Tailwind UI is a paid version of what Tailwind Labs, the team, offers. So you can buy these pre-composed components. So we didn't end up using them because we have very specific, very custom designs for our projects usually. So like that, they might look really totally different from what Tailwind UI has to offer. But I would say if you're building website, you're freelancing, or you're creating a website for a client, and if they don't have really specific branding or style in mind, it's a very good way to start. I believe it's pretty inexpensive. So like if you don't want to spend too much time writing your own Tailwind components, like you could totally go with Tailwind UI. And that's also make sure to check out the Headless UI. So it's there like a free version of Tailwind Labs components, and they have things that are tricky to style. So like the select list or pop over menus, things like that. So definitely check that out.
All right, we got the last question. I think it was from Bernardo. Since Decanter is using Storybook already, what use does Decanter version 7 Netlify app get? And is that data coming from a manually populated static page? Or where does the data for that come from?
Yeah, the Storybook. So does that mean Decanter React? So we're actually getting rid of that. So Decanter React was our React component library that works with Tailwind, but we decided that it's actually gotten difficult to maintain. And then because like when we try to create a component library and then in our own project, we have to pull them in and then customize them further. And then with that one extra layer, it actually creates a lot more work to work with our project. So we decided that we are not going to continue that project. But for the Decanter website, the preview that you just saw, I think that is just a static file. So we have a static HTML file, and then just pull in the CSS file that's generated from the Tailwind configuration in Decanter. And it does nothing but simply for us mostly to test things on our own while we change our configs. And then, but a new version of the Decanter 7 website is actually in the works. So Rebecca and then Jacob on our team are working on it. So we will likely spend some time on it this year, and then have a brand new Decanter 7 website for everyone to see. So keep your eyes out.
Thanks, Yvonne and Rebecca. I don't see any more questions on your list, and I don't see any in the chat. Is there anybody in the room who would rather speak? Would that be easier for someone if they have a question? Well, we have 3 minutes left.
I do have another Drupal view specific question, if that's okay.
Go for it.
I'm trying to figure out how to make a responsive grid for my output. And when I try to add the classes, specifically for the target sizes like small, medium, large, extra large, it won't accept the characters. Is there a way to make a responsive grid easy with a single class?
I wonder if you have a link somewhere, James, if you could share with us. Like if we can take a look at what you mentioned, like the
Yeah.
source code, or we could, then I think that would be a little bit easier.
Give me 1 second. I can post a link to the page I'm working on.
I'm gonna hit stop record if that makes sense to everybody. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Aaron.